Welcome to episode 65, and this week we are joined by somebody heavily involved in the Acolyte. Stay tuned for more. Hello explorers and welcome back to episode 65. Joining me as always in the co-seat is a scoundrel so renowned that even Jabba the Hutt can't afford to put a bounty on him. It's Jimmy.
Howdy.
How's your week been then, mate?
Oh man,
One of them.
school
Oh
starts this
mate.
week.
Oh
2 days of
mate.
school. Had 1 day of school last week. 2 days of school this week. No students yet. Man, it is hard coming off 2 months of not being having to be responsible for an actual job. But no, they've been pretty good. Weather has been scorching. It's in the hundreds here, so it's like 40
Nice.
degrees for you. In the 40s for you guys. Um, just been miserable. Dogs can't get outside. We can barely get outside. Gives us time for some other things that kind of lead to my force encounters, but not too bad,
Ooh.
So, but yeah, how's your week been?
Yeah, about the same to be honest. Absolute scorcher. The kids here, they've got 3 weeks left. So they're starting to realise that I think as well. Been to my best friend's wedding down south in a place called Plymouth. If not Plymouth, Portsmouth, other side of the country, if people aren't aware of that. Again, I've got some things from that on the Force encounters. But yeah, it's been a very busy week, a hot week, but quite a enjoyable week, I think.
Oh, I also wanted to bring up, Jack, before we get into any news, is have you been watching the Olympics?
I have, but only like a little bit. I've not really watched it this time, man. Usually I'm fully invested, but
Yeah. We watch the triathlon stuff. We watch a lot of the beach volleyball. We love that, men's and women's. I just wanted to mention the medal counts. I don't know if you knew where America was at and where Great Britain was at in the medal count. I'm not sure
I,
which one on top
I'm
of who.
so glad. I'm so glad you brought this up because I've seen how many people participate from America and China, and it's something ridiculous. Like, as
Eh,
an example, it's 500 people for one event to the equivalent of like the rest of the world, 10, maybe 20.
It's not our fault. I mean, we can only qualify the same amount of people as you guys do. You only get so many
Ridiculous.
slots. Just America.
America, America dominant.
But man,
Yeah,
you guys have got some crazy swimmers and some crazy triathletes, man. Good cyclists.
yeah,
Been fun to watch. So we
good.
should do some
Yeah,
kind of a Star Wars Olympics. I don't know what that would be, but we'll see.
interesting. Yeah, if anyone's got any ideas on Star Wars Olympics, definitely give us a shout. That's a great idea. And speaking about listeners, followers, examples, what we've got then is Jimmy's time to shine. So again, here we go.
Oh boy. And again, as always, preface this with a big apology. I'm not trying to mess anyone's name up. So we got Patient Stardust. Thanks for joining us. We got Jody Ann Artistry, Dave Worrell, Hannah Banana. That's a fun one. LeBron Fett, Nerd Builder, Mando Talk, Abstract Depression. That's sad. Gonk Droid Army. Yeah. Russ Ramage, Daryl Evans, Jason Delirio, Devaster 007, Loth Cats. Ooh, I like that one. Nick Sherwood, Russell Baldwin, who is a good friend of mine and one of my bosses, Pump Cammy, and Justin Matt Him.
Yeah,
Justin
I
Him.
just did matter. Some absolute crackers there. Hannah Banana wins it for me this week. I love that one. As always, thank you to everyone that's joining us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, Threads, and YouTube. Please like, share, subscribe. It's all one word if you want to join. Explore the Force. Again, as always, I've said it every single week and I will continue to say it. We're growing massively. It's an awesome community that we've got. Loads and loads of people chatting loads and loads of Star Wars. If you love Lego, books, movies, series, absolutely anything, get on these socials, get content created and making for us, and you'll see just how many people honestly are commenting on some of these posts and some of the things people are finding on the internet. It's absolutely like, it just blows my mind. But again, thank you to everybody. Explore the Force, all one word. Thank you so much. Okay, so it's that time of week again. Let's get into this week's Force Encounters. Okay, Jimmy, what have you got?
All right. Well, it has been 1,000 degrees out, and my nephews are having a Nerf gun party for because their birthdays are about 2 weeks apart. So they're renting out this place, and let's just say, if you look on our Facebook page, I have posted a couple things. I'll give some
Nice.
more photos, but we'll just say that there will be a Star Wars presence / bounty hunter, all made out of cardboard.
I
I
can't
found these
wait.
plans on YouTube. My wife is super crafty, and she kind of helped me out a ton. Obviously, it looked like a big hot mess if she wasn't involved in it, but I don't want to give too much away. I will have more photos from the event on Saturday, but it's been pretty fun, and it's been too hot to
Nice.
really be outside. So then
Yeah.
and then it's so funny how much Star Wars is around us, because my wife and I were out to dinner, or we went out to lunch a couple weeks ago before she left for Florida, and
Yeah.
this guy is waiting on us, and I was like, man, that looks like the dark saber on his arm. And I was like, nah, it's not the dark. He's this big hulking, like athletic guy. And
Yeah.
he comes by. I'm like, hey, is that the dark saber? He goes, yeah. He goes, I was going to say something about your tattoos. And then so we started talking back and forth. And then the other day, I
Nice.
took my wife to a new restaurant, and I swear to you, this young kid. We were at this Mexican restaurant. Food was phenomenal. Pollo Express. If you're in the Wichita area, check it out.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, is that Ahsoka on his arm? I was like, nah, just young kids don't like Star Wars, whatever. And then he came by me, and I was like, whoa. And I was like, let me see your arm. And he had Rex's helmet, and he had the Ahsoka clone trooper
Nah.
helmets. He had a Ahsoka. I mean, he was all decked out. Gave him a sticker. Hopefully he joined. We'll be definitely, that was the first time I'd taken Molly there, and she's loving it. So we'll
Yeah.
definitely go back and get that kid's name and get him to be a follower. But it's
Nice.
just kind of fun to me, like how much Star Wars is out there, and just people you
Oh,
would, you look at someone, and that's us judging people like we do, unfortunately. But I'm like, oh, that's not the dark saber. Oh, that's not so.
yeah.
It is, man. I just love the fact that everyone loves Star Wars, and it really is for all kinds of people. So that was kind of fun
Yeah.
for me to see that. And I'll be in not a tournament, but a kind of like a little event for Star Wars Unlimited tomorrow night.
Nice.
When it comes out on Tuesday, I'll be going to the Wizards Alley again in Wichita. Eric will be joining us. Jacob will be joining us, and
Nice.
we'll be doing some Star Wars Unlimited stuff there. I think we're going to get some interviews from some people,
Okay.
so it'll be all
Yeah.
right. We'll get those posted. So yeah, been busy week. Lots of fun Star
Nice.
Wars stuff to keep my mind distracted from the sadness that's coming next week. So how about you, Jackie boy?
Yeah. So I've been doing a little bits and bobs as well to get myself ready because we're going away on holiday soon. But funny how you mentioned about meeting people through Star Wars because, like I mentioned earlier, I went to my best friend's wedding. I was the best man there. Gave a
I
little
thought I was your
speech.
best friend.
You're my American best friend. I did my best man speech. Chuck some Star Wars stuff in there. And one of the guys come up to me, he's talking about Star Wars, and then he mentioned the podcast without me even saying anything to him. So I was a little bit curious as how to he knew about Explore the Force. He just said, "Oh, you do a Star Wars podcast, don't you?" So he must have spoke to the groom or something. I don't know. So he's joined the page. So hello to Russ, big
Oh,
Star
awesome.
Wars fan. And a funny one today was in a place called Boots. I don't know if you've got it over in America, but it's like a chemist thing. So you go in there, get tablets, deodorants, makeup, all that good stuff. Obviously, it's for my wife. She was in there
Uh-huh.
with me. She was getting some stuff, and the woman, quite an old lady to be fair, pulled out a pen and had original Stormtrooper on the pen. And my wife was just like, "Oh, do you like Star Wars then?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I am quite a big Star Wars geek." And I was like, and at this point, I was at the door waiting to go. And yeah, Chris was like, "Yeah, Explore the Force, give it a search." My husband over there, he runs a podcast with an American friend. So yeah, it's so weird. Like obviously, the listeners might not know this, but we don't talk before we record a podcast because we keep it all quite neutral or natural, our emotions and reactions. So it's so funny that you've met people this week through the Force, and so have I. But
Yes.
yeah,
It was
the
funny.
wonders.
I took the stickers with me the other day when I met the first guy, because she's like, "Why do you?" Because I sometimes Molly usually has them on me, and I have them in my Jeep. But we're taking her car. I'm like, "Do you have any stickers?" She goes, "Why?" Like, I'm going to meet someone that likes Star Wars today,
Yeah,
and the Force willed it, so that was pretty cool. Oh, and one last thing, I want to give a quick plug too. To Tuesday night. So when this comes out Tuesday, me and the mailman will be doing our first live feed. We're going to try to do those every Tuesday night leading up to the Skeleton Crew, which will come in the news.
Nice.
But this week we're going to talk about all the stuff that's coming up at the D23. So kind of lead us into the news. But that'll be our first show together, live show on YouTube and Instagram. Hop on, give us your thoughts and things like that. So, it's kind of fun to explore the Force family is growing. And that'll be a good way for us to, get to meet more people, I hope.
Yep. And that will lead us, like you keep saying, buddy, into this week's news. Okay, so this week we've got D23 that is happening. Are we going to be seeing a trailer? Because we've had lots of new images of the Skeleton Crew, which is supposedly coming out December the 3rd. Am I excited about the Skeleton Crew yet? Nope. I'm still a bit dubious, being a full kids series sort of thing, live action. Are you excited for the Skeleton Crew? Jimmy, what do you think so far with the images that we've seen? Do you think we'll get a trailer next week?
Well, yeah. I mean, we met, if people haven't seen, we met with the mailman and TR from Crafting on Ilum, and we talked, I think it was Friday. And the images, we talked about it. It was really fun. I thought that TR and Mike had some amazing points. I was really blown away by some of the stuff that they saw that I didn't catch. And I was curious how people would take the article. Like, Jude Law said, like, the first word that comes to mind is joy. So I'm like, and they just they both rallied around that, as did I. I was concerned about, what the fandom would be like with the word like that coming out. But like TR and Mike both said, that's exactly what the fandom needs right now, is some joy in Star Wars. And I think you need to go into it with an open mind that it's for kids. It's about kids. And I love the look of it, the nostalgia, the idea of Goonies, E.T., Super 8, like all these, Stranger Things, whatever. I'm for it. I think as long as the kids, I'm a little nervous about the kids acting, because they're kids. Like, they may not be super strong actors. We mentioned like Acolyte a little bit, where sometimes the younger twins, I didn't think the acting was great, but they're kids. I mean, you got to take it for what it is. But we're excited for. What about you? Like, Jack, how did you feel when you saw those photos? Like, because we talked about like Mike and I growing up together on our bikes, riding, and they have their hover bikes, and we're just like, man, that's like our childhood all over again.
Yeah. The images look absolutely fantastic. I'm loving some of the cosplays, the bike stuff. I'm excited about. Is it Neil?
Yeah.
Real.
The Orlaton or whatever.
Yeah, the Orator. I'm looking at that as well. The height levels are sort of going up, but like you said, I'm just a bit dubious at the minute with kids being sort of in the main limelight. And again, I hope, regardless what happens, I'm definitely going to be one of those. But I just hope if it is bad or the acting is bad, kids-wise, people just don't take to the socials to absolutely destroy them. You've got to remember, these are young kids.
Man, if they do that, they should just be canceled themselves. Like, if I get it, you don't like the shows, that's fine, because there's certain big social media entities that are going to hate it no matter what. It could be the best thing in Star Wars, and they're going to find a reason not to like it.
Yeah.
If they attack the kids, then people are going to have to just like stand up to these people. I mean, I know sometimes we're afraid, like, they got 3.3 million followers, they would destroy us, but there's a point where you just can't go after kids. Like, you can't do it. Look at Jake Lloyd. Look at the stuff Amon Best went through.
Yeah, exactly.
Kelly Marie Tran, like, those are adult. I mean, Jake was not an adult. He was a kid and got hammered, and he still will not come back to Star Wars. And that was before social media.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I'm nervous for them. So, but so we've had some other crazy news, and I think it's been confused. I think people are also trying to clickbait people. Justin Simeon opened up about Lando. Now, Justin Simeon was the guy who was picked when it first was announced way back when. I don't know, that was before Celebration Europe, right? That was before London, I think. That was like the D23 prior to that, I believe, or maybe it was at Celebration when they talked about Lando. But since then, they have come out and said that Justin Simeon had been released, in that, the Glovers, Donald and his brother, I can't think of his brother's name right now, that's Steph or something like that, or Steven, had full control of writing it. It's going to be a movie again or something like that. But so there's been some confusion as Orlando's been canceled. I don't think that's the case. I think groups who are saying that it's been canceled are looking for clickbaits. I think that now that Donald Glover is finished with, he was working on Mr. and Mrs. Smith and a show called Atlanta. Those are all
Yep.
both over. I think his attention. We should be hearing stuff. Maybe we hear stuff this week. Let's hope so. But yeah, here it says Justin Simeon opened up about Lando. It's pretty developed. Yeah, there was a Bible, there was concept art, there were scripts, but it just wasn't meant to be. I get over it. I'm in therapy a lot. For me, the answer is that you have to really face it. It is true grief. I never had a child. I've never lost a child, but it's what I imagine the pain might be like. That seems a bit extreme. You pour so much of your heart and soul into something, but ultimately you don't have control over whether it lives or dies, and it is a true grieving process. I understand being upset because this is probably his big break to do something, but to compare it to losing a child, like
Extreme.
I don't even have kids, and I think that's insane.
Yeah. Same.
This is a project. Your life will go on. I get it. If you're that good, and he must be talented if he got picked for Star Wars, but I'm going to focus more on it's like losing a child. Like that seems inconsiderate to anyone who's ever had to go through that, I think.
Yeah, I think the poor choice of words. Yeah, and I think as well as trying to show a little bit too much passion. I think he's just rushed with what he said there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so see what happens with that. Again, like you said, mate, I think something might come out of D23.
Yeah, I think we just need to wait and be patient because since they've announced the Glover stuff, nothing has been heard, which is fine. Those guys were busy, now it looks like their schedule's opened up, so we'll see.
Yeah. And speaking of people being busy, The Mandalorian and Grogu have apparently been very busy. There are some photos roaming around the internet which could confirm a return to Navarro. So they are filming. It has been set up. Things are happening. Still no idea on plot. Still no idea on pretty much anything else apart from a expected release. But again, we're not 100% on that. Thoughts and feelings on this for myself at the minute is excited because I absolutely love The Mandalorian. But I did see Kevin Scott post something which did resonate with me a little bit, where he thinks that these sort of plans and these schedules shouldn't be shown at shows. Like the Marvel timeline series, when's this coming? Star Wars timeline series, when's this coming? He thinks that this sort of stuff should just be kept under wraps because then people aren't expecting it and there's no, well, you said it was coming out on this date and you said it. So me personally, I think is absolutely bang on the money with that. I'd prefer that if I'm honest. I'd rather hear something in the wind or, the Mandalorian's coming in the next few years. And I'd be like, right, so that's coming in the next few years. Give the company a little bit of scope because what we don't want to see is things being rushed like we've seen in the past.
Or not happening. I mean, think about all the stuff that's been said, and I'm not bashing on Kathleen Kennedy. I know they have big plans and then things change, but don't announce until it's almost done. I get it. You have a plan, like you want to do these things, you want to get people excited. But I mean, how many times? Like, no one focuses on that. They always focus on the stuff that's not coming out, and I think you're setting yourself up for failure. And I would rather wait a year because you get a little teaser or something and wait a year for it. I mean, some of the stuff we've been hearing about for years, and we're not going to see any of it. So, my thoughts are they're going to Navarro. I hope they do something for Grief Karga. Why can't I think of his name right now? Carl Weathers. Thank you. I totally blanked. I hope they have something planned, which knowing Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau and the love that people like Brendan Wayne and them have, the way we've heard and we've listened to them talk about, and so I hope they have something planned for him and just some kind of moment in that movie that's gives a shout out to him for everything he did for Star Wars. And I'm excited. I'm a little concerned about it all being green screened or volumed. No, maybe our friend Dawn can shed some light on that if once we get her on after the Skeleton Crew is over. So she can let us know. I don't know what we don't want find out too much, but I'm excited for it. I want more Star Wars. I want it in the theater. I just don't get mad at me, Jack. not. I'd rather see something from Andor in the theater, like, 'cause it's gonna be dark, it's gonna be gritty. Like, I feel like Mando
Yeah,
kind of belongs on TV because it's not big hitting, it's not as big and as epic as the movies. Do you think they can do it? Do you think they can make this
yeah,
movie as epic as the movies?
yeah. 100%,
I'm a little
100%. I
bit
get what you're saying.
I'm a little bit hesitant after season 3 because it was so campy, but
Yeah,
I mean, we're gonna get to see the Mythosaur on the big screen. I'm down. If I get some Game or House of Dragon type
yeah,
dragons slash Mythosaurs, I'll be all right
yeah.
with that. But I don't know.
What we've got to think of though, this is going to be a Mandalorian episode, book movie,
Oh
time
yeah,
wise. So
yeah.
expectations are going to be super high. They've got to really find the right balance to make a TV series work in such a way that it's a movie. But I think it will work because of the episode that we saw at Celebration that time, The Mandalorian season 2.
I
That
didn't
blew
see
my
it.
mind watching that.
You got to see it.
You're not going to see that. Oh, it absolutely blew my mind until Vizsla fell.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think they can pull it off. I think they can pull it
All right.
off.
Well, I like
But
that. I'm gonna go with your expertise since you've seen Samando on the big screen.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
cool.
So maybe our next guest could help us with some production questions. You
Quite
know.
possibly. You may or may or not know a thing or two about it.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to a very special episode. Now, this episode, we've had it on hold for a little while, just whilst the dust settles down. However, the time is right for the legend himself, the Jedi Master of production design, the Jedi Master of VFX and concept artistry. He's been involved in some absolute mega blockbusters such as Jurassic World, Guardians of the Galaxy, World War Z, and Star Wars The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, and more recently, The Acolyte. He's also known to stand up for what he believes in, as he stood to the last man at the Battle of Crate, but not without taking down some of those First Order. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Kev Jenkins.
Hello. Good evening.
Hello,
Morning.
Kev.
Wherever we are.
Thank
Hello.
you very much for joining us and obviously taking the time to join me and Jimmy.
No problems. Yeah, good to see you both.
Just so the listeners are fully aware of who you are, Kev, I know obviously it goes without saying, but could you let everyone know a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, my name's Kev Jenkins. I'm a production designer, which probably what that really means will come out in some of the conversation. I have, as you say, designed recently The Acolyte, Jurassic World Dominion, Rise of Skywalker, and then in various roles, whether that be art director or concept artist or design supervisor, I've worked for over 25 years in the film business. Initially starting in VFX, working on what was an old BBC series, groundbreaking at the time, called Walking with Dinosaurs, which was basically a kind of a sort of documentary. But that was my break, or at least the second series was one of my breaks into VFX. And before that, I was 15 years a book jacket and games illustrator, working for publishers, doing lots of book jackets and working on lots of Amiga games and all sorts of stuff. And I'm so old, I was painting in the transition between real and digital.
Yeah,
So all of my original artwork is oils, acrylics, airbrush, all that. I was literally a trained airbrush illustrator. That's how I sort of started and sort of kept going from there.
amazing. Some of the things you mentioned there are part of my childhood. I'm only obviously 34. Walking with Dinosaurs, pretty much religiously used to watch that as a kid. You mentioned games as well. Another thing that you worked on, Worms. I absolutely loved
The
Worms, the
original
game.
Worms. I worked for a lot in the Amiga in the world, but no, the original Worms covers and the Worms
Yeah,
logo and the original design of the original look of them, that was something I did. And I did a whole bunch of Amiga games, Alien Breed 3D, and I did stuff for Psygnosis, I did stuff for Virgin Interactive, I did stuff for, God, I can't even remember now. I did Sega Mega Drive.
the list could literally go on and
Yeah,
on
I've
and
got them all
on.
under the bed somewhere. There's tons of paintings upstairs, all squirreled away around the house from back in the day.
Amazing, amazing. You mentioned obviously that you'd started with VFX. So one of the first questions, just to get everyone up to speed, including myself, is how do you make stuff and how do you do effects?
Well, I used VFX as a springboard because my goal ever since I was a kid was to work in film production in some capacity. And that's like, how the hell do you do that? It's like a kind of a strange, like, where do you apply? You don't. And so because I had a background in the 90s of moving from traditional to digital, because my version of Photoshop I started with was 1.0 before layers. Literally one layer, one undo, no undo, just revert. And so I used that then to teach myself 3D, and I started sort of using that for the illustrations I used to do in advertising and publishing. But then what that allowed me to do is I ended up using using a piece of software called Electric Image, which back in the day I actually heard about because John Knoll and the Rebel Unit team used it on the Phantom Menace. And funnily enough, I actually did throw that at John in my interview for ILM, but because we just ended up talking about for Electric Image for about 10 minutes. But I learned that software, and then when an opportunity came up, I literally kind of cold called Framestore because I knew a friend was there, and then I got put into someone else, and God, I can't take the jumps I had to go through to get that first gig, because VFX was very small, and through the early sort of years of my career in VFX, now the team's numbering thousands, and that's because they pipelined the whole industry. And it basically, but we're back in the day when I used to do it, like if I remember Superman Returns, apart from the final comp, I would do the modeling, do the map painting, do the setup, do the rendering, do the pre-comp, and do all that. And then I remember doing sequences of like I don't know, 60 70 shots. Now that would be split not between one person, but between about, I don't know, 20 30 40 people. It's a very different industry, but I was there when I would like to think, and I think a lot of us look back at that as the interesting golden era of VFX, where it was really hard doing a tree. When I started, it was like, oh my God, how do we do trees? This is ridiculous. It was really tough and really hard to do. So I started as one of the first map painters in London, digital map painter, which was the transition. If you know Star Wars, we all know there's those oil painted map paintings. Mike Pangrazio is an influence of mine, Chris Evans, all these guys. And so I was doing this digitally for Framestore. And again, this was at a time when now, if you go to the internet and type in cloudy sky and mountains, you can get a 420K image or whatever. We had to hand paint it all, because the biggest image you could find on the internet when I started was literally about, I don't know, 960 by 450 or something. So it was a very different, it was almost like traditional and digital map painting were very closely aligned back then. And so I just kind of anyway, so what was the question about VFX?
how you literally make stuff and get the effects. But I'm happy with that, Kev.
Right. So it is the best way to describe it. I would describe VFX as manipulation of pixels, because in a funny way, it can be many things. It can be creating three-dimensional objects in the computer, lighting them, rendering them. But funnily enough, like the way that Photoshop is, but having a timeline, you literally put things together in the computer and, shall we say, make them move, and that, whether that's animation. So all those traditional skills that used to be around map painting, shooting models, dolly camera moves, grading the actual film, that's just all done digitally now. That's the best way to describe visual effects. It's many disciplines.
Okay. So the idea, so sorry, so just one more idea then. So, for example, you'd get given an idea, or would you come up with the idea first, Kev? Do you know what I mean? So if you were given
you're talking about my job then or my job now.
Say again, sorry.
It depends if you're talking about my job then or my job now, because doing VFX is not what I do now. VFX is what I use.
Back then.
Back then, it kind of is still the same way. Obviously, the shot count has got so much bigger. I mean, when we used to do a show back then, and the shot count used to be, oh my god, there's 300 shots. Now it's very easy to touch almost every frame. VFX is whether people think it's easy or fast or cheap, it is the most expensive part of the film business. It's massively expensive to do VFX work, any VFX work. And so back then, I suppose in a strange way, it was less flexible and slower, so people were a little bit more, I need this shot, it's a boat, and it passes you by and it'll be this. Whereas now, through the advances in previs and speed and real-time visualization, all these kind of things, people can now go, I don't know, let's move around the camera and see what the shot is. Whereas films, when I started, were much more, this is the shot, and this is exactly what you need to do in the shot. And the only way that shot would not appear in the film will be what's called a process in editing called omits, which is like, you don't need that shot in the edit anymore. And so it's very different to what it is now, because like I remember, you know, one of the funny, you know, at the cusp of even the VFX industry going from using film to all digital and everything. I remember sat in a screening room with Jonathan Frakes when we were doing Thunderbirds, and he would literally always say, let me see it in the edit, and you slip the shot in between the other shots in between so we could see what it looked like stitched together. Now you can do that digitally in seconds, but it would be, you know, someone would shout out rock and roll and you play the shot back and forth and you do the best you can looking at things, and then you kind of make your changes. So you have to do your work, go down to the cinema, see it screened, oh God, that's wrong, go back up and paint it. It was very different to what it is now, where it's all, again, I was in what I call, should we say, part of the golden age of VFX, which was a little bit more, I don't know, just kind of like, oh, look, we've invented the car. That's interesting. You know, I mean, I remember, you know, there's a lot of terminology that VFX artists would understand, like ambient occlusion. You know, I remember, you know, when it was invented and when it turned up, we go, oh my God, but we can't use it. It will take too long to render, and all these kind of things. And so, you know, it was very different.
Wow.
But I did work at companies, obviously, you know, because I worked at Frame Store and I worked at Industrial Light and Magic, and you kind of got used to the modernization. But that was just the very early, the first few years was literally everything was sticky tape and plaster. And how the hell do we get out of this?
You said that your goal from a young kid was production design. What inspired you to want to do that? Because, you know, I can't imagine I could ask a lot of kids what they want to be when they grow up, and none of them would say a production designer.
So I've said this, not even though I probably knew the word production design, it was more like I wanted to be behind the camera doing the design development. So back in 1978, because I'm incredibly old, I actually saw Star Wars at the cinema opening week, and one of the things, there was very few publications out at the time because they didn't know Star Wars because of the hit it was, and we'd heard about it coming over. Because, you know, you got to realize back then, Star Wars released in May 1977. In England, we didn't get it till January 1978. And so in that time, some publications and magazines were out, and there was a thing that you can find them on eBay, and I've still got my own, which is, there was a thing called the official Star Wars collector's edition, and it had the Hildebrandt painting of Darth Vader on the front, which is kind of a repaint of the Tom Jung original poster. And in there, it was pretty much a making of Star Wars. And I was just fascinated by a couple of things. One of them was seeing this sandcrawler with scaffolding coming out the top. And then the other one was obviously Ralph and Joe's art. And so, even though I've always been a film fan and a film person, my interest has always been, oh, how do they do that? Oh, that's really clever. Oh, because I'll watch a load of old films, you know, even Hitchcock, and go, do you know what? The only person in there that's real is that, because the rest of it is literally a piece of oil painting on a glass, and the stairs aren't even there. I've always been fascinated by the makings of movies, and so even back when I did see Star Wars, which. And it literally, I know this sounds cliche to a lot of filmmakers, but a lot of us did see Star Wars, and it's very hard to describe to anybody now. I mean, Jimmy, how old are you, by the way, just if you don't mind me asking?
48.
Okay, so you're around kind of the cusp of when it was out, obviously, you know. But what's really hard to describe that people are very used to now, I use the analogy that we're all watching these films, and they're like, you know, it's like a horse and cart going past, and it's all very nice. And then all of a sudden, this futuristic Ferrari turns up amongst the, you know, there was science fiction films, you know, 2001, which I will argue still holds up today, but is a very different style of filmmaking process, you know. But I grew up on, you know, black and white, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers. You know, science fiction was, quite frankly, a crap back in the day, in the fact that it was what it was, but we loved science fiction, and so we would watch Harryhausen, we would watch, you know, I don't know, The Terror from Beyond Space, which was the precursor to the Thing and to Alien, and then you watch Robinson Crusoe on Mars. What I mean is, sci-fi was just a bit crap. You know, Planet of the Apes was one of the good ones, and so when Star Wars came along, and it literally looked about 200 years more advanced, it looked like science fiction was in reading a novel, and no one had ever seen it before. So it's a bit like being on an island, and all of a sudden you've lived your whole life there, and then a spaceship turns up, literally. And so, but what fascinated me, because I'd always, you know, like I grew up loving Harryhausen and all those kind of things. So I was already intrigued by stop motion animation, which was VFX back in the day. And so that led me to kind of want to go, how do you draw for a living in the film business? Whether the term back then was I want to be a production designer, I don't quite know.
Very cool.
Interesting. Yeah, that sort of leads me on to the next question as well, Kev. So it's, how difficult is it, or was it, to make Star Wars seem like Star Wars? Like you mentioned there, it's not really sci-fi, it's more space fantasy, isn't it?
Star Wars, that's the big thing that I always argue with people. From a design point of view, even a storytelling point of view, and because see, look, I go back so far as to go, look, I have to base everything off of, I call it Star Wars, other people call it A New Hope. It didn't have the title A New Hope when I first saw it. It's just Star Wars, and then there's other films in Star Wars world. But it's like it is a space fantasy. It is not science fiction like Star Trek or 2001 or many things. And the reason it's space fantasy is because its influences are, we know it comes from John Carter of Mars, we know it comes from Dune, we know it comes from all sorts of science fiction influences. I can point out all of them. But what that means is the science part, as in, is there a fire in space, is not relevant in Star Wars, because what George did back then was he made storytelling override reality if he needed to tell a clearer story. Because whether people believe it or not, a lot of Star Wars fans are, should we say, either getting on a bit older than me, younger than me, but in a funny way, I can tell you the reaction I saw is that, you know, I saw it when I was 7 or 8, and like I walked out the cinema and I said to my dad, "Oh my God, we got to see that again, it's amazing." But my dad's reaction was like, "Oh, do we have to?" And so it really was back then. It captured everyone's imagination, but it really fired a bunch of 7-year-olds up in the right way, because it was, should we say, like a modern version of a Harryhausen adventure or those kind of things. So, and what I mean by that is, it's a fable. It's a story about princesses and castles and dark towers and dungeons and rescuing from dragons and all those things. It's not about how many tachyon beams you can plug in on Thursday to get from A to B. And so, but then again, so look, people take what they want out of Star Wars, and people can enjoy it in different ways. But for me, being there the first time round, I believe it's a space fantasy and not a science fiction film.
How does that differ for you then when you're creating The Force Awakens, right? We've had this layoff. The last time we saw a Star Wars movie, it was prior to Star Wars because it was the prequels. When you come into that, how do you make it, you know, if those rules don't apply, is it easier that way because you don't have to worry about rules? You can just wing it. You can just make that look cool. And
it's kind of weird because in a funny way, if I was to talk about the way that what's really interesting is, to me, even though the prequels and the original trilogy sit together as 6 movies, they're kind of the same but separate. And I would even kind of say that they feel very different. They look very different. I would say that the prequels go more into and towards science fiction than space fantasy. And the sequels, when we did them, were, people have to remember, because there was a lot of strange comments. I remember when we were sort of designing it all, and people were going, "Oh, well, it doesn't look like the strange, all the world building from the prequels." It's like, well, the prequels were set before, and we're set after. So I'm doing, the conversation is we're doing a sequel to Return of the Jedi, so we needed to follow on that world and how that was, and also at the time, and again, the internet and the reaction has changed, but at the time, the prequels, shall we say, were not regarded like the original trilogy was, if I'm to be polite. And so what I think, and again, people can have all their own opinions and do what the hell they want, say what they want, and that's fine, and I respect everyone's individual opinion. In my opinion, what JJ did in The Force Awakens was say to everybody, do you remember this is what it felt like in 1978 to 1983? And that's what we did as far as a feeling, knowing that we were, and the job was to have a film that followed on from Return of the Jedi. But that's not to disrespect any of what went before, because we that was no, it was just more like we weren't making a sequel to the prequels. We were making a sequel to Return of the Jedi, and so that was the language, feeling, emotion that everyone was trying to instill in that filmmaking process.
What would you say the most difficult part of your job? If we can focus, let's focus on the Acolytes, and we came off that. As a production designer, what is the most difficult part for you? Is it that aspect of trying to make sure everything flows from everything else? Because now you've got something that no one's seen before. I mean, we're reading in comics and reading in books, but we've never seen this time period before. So,
well, the honest truth is, I don't know if anyone actually knows what a production designer really does, because you're seeing the picture version. A lot of it is how do you deliver the production from a design perspective. How do we afford that? How do we make those sets? How do we go to this location? How do we get everyone to that location? How do we build it so we can do that? How, production design is not, it's a much more complicated process than just the actual design. The design is a part of the process. But for the Acolyte's perspective, from a design point of view, one of the tricky things that I think, having done Star Wars, this was a show that has no war in it. And so we were going back in time. And so there was no use of many of the visual tricks that people understand Star Wars to be. So, for example, we had this sort of running joke, or I did anyway, when we were going through, you're drawing Star Wars and you go, oh, it doesn't look like Star Wars, just stick an R2 unit in it. It looks like Star Wars. And so, stick a stormtrooper in it. Oh, look, wow, we've made it look like Star Wars. Thank God, because it didn't. And, put an X-Wing fighter in space. Thank God it looks like Star Wars again. How do you do that when all those things are taken away from you? So I had no X-Wing fighters. I had no TIE fighters, no stormtroopers, no war, no Empire. I had absolutely nothing. And the only thing, in a funny way, I did have that's a bit almost like timeless, I suppose, like the Parthenon in Rome, was this little bit of Coruscant. So if you watch The Acolyte, I know it sounds weird, apart from a little bit of that building and some people with lightsabers, there's nothing else of any other Star Wars in there. But my tricky job was to try and make it look like Star Wars and trick everybody to think they were still watching Star Wars when everything they've ever been used to is not there at all on any other planet, in any spaceship, on any spaceship. There's none of any of the tropes of any all the other shows, whether it be all the way from Andor, Mandalorian. They all get to use stormtrooper helmets, Boba Fett's.
Yeah.
They get to use TIE fighters. They get to use X-Wing fighters. They get to use all these things. I had nothing. Zero.
That's one of the interesting observations I had, that I noticed that, your Andor, your Mandalorian especially, is quite war-torn and gritty. Whereas the Acolyte to me seemed very polished, like clean, if that makes sense.
Kind of. I'd like to think I did, because like the prequels, especially their versions of Coruscant were kind of very CG and clinical. I tried to do what I call dirty Star Wars, which was aging them as heavily as even the original. If you watch it, you should see. I mean, you look at Coruscant. I mean, I've literally beaten the crap out of it. There is scuff marks and dinks and chops and this and that. And when you go to the worlds or wherever, and even the ships, it's had the crap beaten out of it. So I like to kind of call it dirty prequels, where we've taken the analogy of what the prequels were made in 1975. Not as far as an aesthetic, but as far as a film process. Because again, if you even watch, Star Wars New Hope, for those of you that are younger than me, but if you watch that, you see how dirty the stormtroopers are, R2 and 3PO and the X-wings are. It's got cleaner and cleaner as it goes on. And so we just went back to throwing mud at the sets and all that kind of stuff and really trying to screw them up. So even though I sort of take your point, I wasn't trying to make it clinical. I was literally trying to create a time period that felt a bit different. And so probably what you're feeling, or maybe I'm wrong, is just the sheer amount of color I put into the Acolyte.
That was the next thing I was going to say.
Yeah, because basically
you get that aura.
Well, yeah, basically there was a conversation I had with Kathy, which was it was about color, because a lot of Star Wars is set on. Everybody knows the center of the universe in Star Wars. It's Tatooine, the only planet that people visit. It's the Mecca. Everyone lives there. It's the world's biggest place. And but what that does is that makes the world very brown.
Yes.
And if you add that to the world of the Empire, which is very grey. And so my solution to make the prequels not be digital and become practical was to try to use as much color as possible on the sets in a way that it's hopefully, and again, this is just me saying this, it's hopefully tastefully done in a way that's screamingly colorful, that people don't notice it too much because they're trying to work out what is still making it or not look like Star Wars. So I use a shed of color in it.
I'll say it felt like Star Wars to me. We loved the show. I mean, as not perfect, like nothing is, but
nothing's perfect.
I never felt
it's the perfect movie.
It wasn't Star Wars. Like I don't know. Like I thought you did a great job of pulling us in and creating the worlds, every little aspect. And
well, hopefully, I'd like to think that no one's supposed to notice, because luckily there has been. And again, look, no Star Wars. People have to realize now it's been out for nearly 50 years, and so you can't like everything. There's Star Wars I don't bother with. There's Star Wars I love. There's Star Wars I don't care about. I just don't watch it. I don't need to get on the internet and shout. But
that's one of the biggest things.
Yeah, but I'd like to think that in a funny way, if I did my job correctly, it made everybody sit there and not worry about the bit that I was doing, was that they're always in Star Wars world.
Yeah, I was never taken out of it by any of the sets or the designs or anything like that. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was awesome because it was new. It was fresh. We weren't on a desert planet, and we were only on a snow planet for a short amount of time. So,
and even the ships, I just literally had to go full on Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and try and find a time period for it, and sort of and use these things that, with the amount of ships I did over the sequel trilogy, all those tricks that I knew there, I could only keep a few of them doing the ships in the Acolyte. But because again, back when Star Wars was out, I bought a Starlog magazine that was spaceships, and it's like you had a Millennium Falcon, and it was the Enterprise, and it was the other 4 other ships that were in science fiction.
I'm massive on Star Wars ships. It's one of the biggest things for me in any Star Wars.
And type in the internet, and you got ships on a million games in a million ways. It's an absolute. It's like starting a new ship. Is like, oh God, really?
I would absolutely love that. I've got millions of books and vehicles, everything from Star Wars, and I love Master Soul ship, but I also like Khmer's ship as well. I thought that looked amazing.
Well, most of it is based upon what's the story, not what's a cool spaceship. So the original version of the Jedi transport went all over the place. And we ended up where we ended up because what Leslie said was, because again, we are not in a time of war. She said, I need a camper van that they can go around in that has all their stuff on the back. I need, the motorbikes are on the back, it's towing the boat, it's
like
got
Lone Star
on the roof. Yeah, and so basically, and so the idea about it was it's just like, it's a giant van that they just move everything around in, and even Kymir's ship, you never see it in the series, but if you, you do see it in the series, you never see this particular view. I like to put nods in there for which people don't realize that help them who's good, who's bad, because Star Wars is very clear, good guy, bad guy. And that can change in the story and the character, but visually it's kind of, I like to be very clear. So even Kymir's ship, as you can see, it's almost like a catamaran, isn't it? With a downward fin at the front and two upward fins at the back. If you look at that straight on and you never see a shot in the show for it, tell me what ship that's going to be in 150 years.
Okay.
You've got to look at it. Well, I'll tell you that basically, like a TIE fighter, it makes an H. So
I was thinking like a vulture droid sort of thing.
Yeah, it's indicating that it will be a bad guy ship in the future, not necessarily part of the design like Ryan did on Rise, where they had the Jedi ship that turns into a TIE fighter. But all I'm trying to do is go, at some point, the bad guys will be influenced by this color, shape, pattern, and so
the subtle nods.
There is, and so and so all those things kind of. And if you notice, probably when you first saw the Poland, as we called it, which is the transport, it's essentially got like a Roman sort of almost galley wedge thing on the front of it that's kind of comes out for us. But I ended up shoving that on all the ships as if, well, this is the spoiler of the day or something like that. So it kind of keeps it together. But it came useful at the end of the last episode, where of course it was driving through the rings and using it to kind of be like what a Roman galleon does, which is batter its way through to other things. So there is a lot more. I think the thing people don't realize about production design is we don't just do pretty pictures. There's a lot more story and development and thought and design over literally every aspect of literally everything. It's all considered and talked about. And like, all right, sometimes we get it wrong, sometimes we don't. Some people hate it, some people love it. I don't know. But that's production. You can't predict the future. You're making a product 2 years before anyone's going to see it.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense as well, because I was going to ask, obviously you feel some form or types of pressure. Do you feel the pressure to get things right? Because obviously Star Wars is scrutinized at every opportunity.
No, I've stopped worried about it. I did when we did Force Awakens. You can't live your life like that. That was before it came out, and we knew that we had a massive hit on our hands, and we knew that we made it feel like Star Wars. To be honest with you, it's like Star Wars is like, from a design point of view, is like trying to paint in the style of, and that is not just Ralph McQuarrie or Joe Johnston. That's Norman Reynolds, that's John Barry. There's so many people that defines the look of Star Wars that they have no clue made an important contribution to it. And so it's like learning a bunch of rules that don't make sense and contradict each other. And just as an artist, you go, oh, that does, that doesn't. But as far as being, again, people are kind of go, oh my God, he's not a true Star Wars fan because he doesn't think about it every night. It's like, you can't work like that, because I'm not, I'm delivering a production and I've just got to try to get it right. And so worrying, you kind of have to go with your conviction and just kind of go, this is what this needs to be because of the story, because as the script that's handed to me says that, then that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Awesome.
How is it working with JJ, Ryan, and Leslie? Like, we can mostly focus on Leslie since we're, the Acolyte's the latest thing, but, how closely do you have to work with them because you're bringing what they want to life? I mean, do you have good relationships with them? I mean, was it?
Well, I have to kind of find a way of plucking their thoughts. Some can't tell me because I'm the one that draws and they're not. And so I have to find a way of a shorthand of trying to understand what they want and give it back to them that solves problems that they asked for, and maybe ones that they didn't know they were going to have because of that's the production process. And so, I mean, Leslie, look, all directors are the same. All good directors are the same. They all kind of work in a similar way. They all have just different personalities. And so, but as far as the relationship goes, the key relationships on any project is normally the director, the cinematographer, and the designer. You know, the designer's on long time before the cinematographer. So, you know, for example, you know, I will, you know, I'm normally on a show well before even a cinematographer turns up, and you know, I'm trying to work with the director to pluck out, should we say, you know, what their story is and give it back to them visually. So you have to work incredibly closely with them to try to give them, you know, what they're looking for. And part of it is just combination of intuition, understanding, because let's face it, if you know, directors don't have time to kind of, you know, even if they can draw, and some of them are fantastic, you know, ways of expressing themselves in all sorts of different ways. All directors are different, and so I'm there just to help visualize their story. And that means working with them very closely to try to understand what's important about the story, and then give it back to them as either a set or a design or a spaceship, or the way that you even infer, you know, easiest way to talk about a set that I sort of worked on from a conceptual point of view was the throne room for Ryan in The Last Jedi, with a red curtain, which is probably the most, you know, that set plus the one I did as a designer myself on Rise, which is the white room. What I mean is they're incredibly graphic spaces, but the whole point of the throne room is that, as you know, you open an elevator that looks like the Death Star, and you walk across a bridge that looks like the Death Star, and you transfer into a theater in front of Snoke, and so it becomes very theatrical, hence the curtain that then burns down, that then reveals that you're basically watching the world burn around you as he's destroying this resistance. And so all of that is a discussion that has to be put in as a design. So you can't make a random room, otherwise it wouldn't do any of the story pieces that are needed to try to, should we say, get that across, because Ryan needed very specific things. It's like, I kind of battled for months as he just say to me, yeah, Kev, I need a curtain. It's like, there's no curtains in Star Wars. I don't know how. But what he needed was a curtain he needed the fire, the storytelling technique of burning the world down around you to reveal the truth. And so, you know, and so he's using the word curtain, and I'm going, what's the Star Wars version of that? And so it's, you know, so that's what makes it very tricky. And that's kind of the relationship conversation where you're trying to understand the point of a place and what it needs to do to tell the story.
And it's true what people say when people say, you know, a picture paints 1,000 words, and the art now that you can see, it is amazing. I'm not just saying it, Kev, because you're on the show. I'm a massive fan, but just looking at that, you know, that picture is saying 1,000 words to me straight away. It's a very iconic scene as well in the movie.
I got lots of these in a drawer somewhere. There's loads of versions of this before.
I've got a special question for you later on. I'm going to ask you. Okay. I've got a special question, so just remember that. But so my next question was going to be about the sets. I was going to ask, you know, have you got that one special set that means something to you? But more than likely, you know, you're probably going to have a number of sets. It doesn't even have to be Star Wars.
There isn't like a set that kind of. There's some sets on every show that you really enjoy making and come out like, and I'm kind of go, I'm really pleased with that. That worked. That did exactly what I wanted it to do. And so, you know, the white room on Rise of Skywalker, I was really, because it's really hard to make a completely white set out of like not a lot, because that's only a 2-wall set. There's nothing behind you into that way. JJ's moving literally books or other bits of white to cover up the gaps that we didn't make and stuff. And so that was one that I really had a lot of. Obviously, and the first set I actually did as a production designer that basically got me the gig and got it rolling was, obviously, if people watch Rise of Skywalker, that blockade runners there, I built that in stage 5 at Pinewood. It's not CG. It's not a
way.
You know, you know, there's people on it. It's in camera. It's on stage 5. I cheated with the perspective and the scale, but the third of the entire blockade runner is really there, and the back third is fundamentally the engines, and half the depth is literally on a kind of a cheat. It's on essentially a frame like a picture. But that was a full-scale partial blockade runner in that cave on Rise of Skywalker, and that kind of got the show on its way. And so that was one I was really proud of, because it was a really tough set to make.
Is that,
you know,
was that in the same hangar as where they did the James Bond submarine?
No, so that's the Bond stage, and so I used that on Jurassic, but I've never used that on a Star Wars production.
Okay.
Well, we did on. Sorry, I am the designer. We did use it on The Last Jedi, but that set I built on for Jurassic, but not for Star Wars. But no, it's on the other side of Pinewood. There's a stage 5 called the Roger Moore stage. That's where the blockade. So I think on my website there is pictures of the blockade runner, but that was all shot. The only thing I think where they kind of VFX'd out was like the roof bits, as in the roof of the soundstage, not the actual blockade runner itself. So, because I've had people say, "Oh, it's a CG," it's like, it's not. We made it. So,
oh man, which would you prefer to work on? Like, if someone comes to you and says, "We got a TV show, and we've got a movie," which direction are you going to be like, I want to go this way because it's a little bit easier, a little bit harder? I mean,
TV is very different now to what it was when I started, and when TV was considered a bit like, I don't know, lesser cousin. I think a lot of actors now and a lot of designers have worked in both. TV is more complicated. There's more moving parts. Movies are sort of, what's really weird is the scale and the feeling. Is like, the process of making the sets, it's the same people. A lot of the team were the same. A lot of the, and all the processes. The Acolyte is done the same way as Rise of Skywalker, Rogue One, Force Awakens. What's very different is the amount of content you have to capture in the time. A movie spends the time capturing 2 hours of content, and so can spend all day setting up this and making that look amazing and doing this, whereas a TV show has to capture 4 times the content in the same time period, but the process is the same. So it depends on the story in the show. I'd never done television before, but I had a good time working with Leslie on the Acolyte. It is a different process. It is more complicated. It just different problems, different ways. So, if it was a passion project, then I wouldn't have any problem doing either. It depends on the story.
What would a passion project be for you? Like, what is?
Do you know what? In a funny way, God, if someone remade a Black Hole, I'd kill to do that.
Oh, wow, you're going back a little ways, but yes, that would be amazing.
It's a haunted house movie.
I have no idea what we're talking about right now, Kev.
Yeah. So in a funny way, look, I saw all those movies that were out, because after Star Wars, there's a whole glut of science fiction stuff, and Disney made the Black Hole, and it's a very flawed, wonky film. But I think because, like anything that you see at the time, when you see it at a certain age, a bit like Star Wars, the way that people spelt Star Wars as a 7-year-old, and then the prequels as a 25-year-old, and then the sequels as a 50-year-old, are very. You just change. Your tastes change. Your likes change. I think that's one of the things that's interesting about even the way that Star Wars fandom is now. Is I just want to remind fans that when you loved the prequels, you were 8. You're now 30 or 40, and you just have to accept that you can never relive that. You can never get it back. I can never get back the feeling when I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981 and was like, oh my God, and
there's a certain aura.
When you get to 16, 17, 18, it fades in a different way, because that naivety of being a child disappears, or the experience of the first experience never returns. So that's all I say to people is like, well, ask me again when you're 50, you'll feel different about it even then, sort of thing. But no, it's a strange one. Look, I'm a huge fan of Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers, and as I said, and what I mean is, in the 80s, this is one of the reasons I love design, and this is what's really different about modern design of look of science fiction. I know this is going completely off track here, but I have to say that some of those old designers knew what the hell they were doing. Because what I mean is, in the space of 4 or 5 years, you had Star Wars released, you had Alien released, you had Blade Runner released, you had The Black Hole, you had Flash Gordon, and you had Dune released in '84. And I can tell you now that those films for a science fiction identity are each completely unique in every single aspect of those frames of films. And you cannot say that now about modern science fiction, where everything's a bit of a mush and a bit of this and a bit of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm very much a fan of the simplicity of the techniques they had actually created a bit more identity now, because it was breaking new ground back then and it was very tough. And so, no, if someone said to me The Black Hole, I'd jump off a cliff for that one. And in a funny way, I love the remake of Battlestar Galactica that Ronald D. Moore did. I think the story, the TV series, is one of the best bits of drama. It just happens to be in a great science fiction wrapper as well. It's fantastic. But in a funny way, I kind of like the 78 one, however crap it is, because it has a different look. And there's something interesting, I think, about Battlestar Galactica that's still yet to be done. But I don't know how someone clever needs to come up with a way of reinventing it again, because they reinvented it so well. It's a bit like Star Trek The Next Gen. I was a massive Star Trek fan as a kid, but Next Gen, yes, it has 2 crap series at the beginning. First series is pretty unwatchable. Second series is like, well, it's science fiction. And then after that, it's some of the best TV that's ever been made. But and then to me, I never used to, but I prefer Next Gen compared to the original Star Trek, because it just, I just thought they nailed the story and the characters, So anyway, I have wandered.
It's all good, Kev. Just going back to the TV and film stuff that you mentioned as well, and you mentioned obviously the time constraints that you've got. Now, I personally think Leslie Edlund's an absolute genius, because how she's designed the Acolyte, and I said this on the last episode that we did, is you could pretty much watch any episode, or watch the Acolyte from any episode being episode 1. So you could start it with episode 3, for example, and work your way through it, and it'd all still make sense, because how I think she's done each episode, it all aligns up. Each question pretty much gets answered.
It was fascinating to watch a lot of reaction, me knowing what's coming, knowing that she had answered and we had discussed and knew every single thing that we were doing. And it was really interesting, because Leslie is probably the most knowledgeable Star Wars fan I have ever met in my life. JJ loves Star Wars. Ryan likes Star Wars. Colin Trevorrow loves Star Wars. We love Star Wars. I know about the design of Star Wars. I'll be honest with you, I don't know that much about the story, because my love is the design of Star Wars. But Leslie, she knows. There's only she knows everything about Star Wars.
You can see it, because my main point was, sorry, Kev, is with a movie you've only got so long to get to know characters, people, places, and then that's it. But TV series, they've got the time to develop the characters properly, and you grow to love them. And it sort of ties in with my next question, and sort of like a mantra that me and Jimmy always say on the show is, love what you love, respect what you don't. This is sort of the way. Is how happy with the Acolyte were you, and what were your thoughts on the criticism it was getting?
No, I'm completely happy with it, because in a funny way, I thought we made a very cinematic show that, should we say, I'm more interested of looking around the corner and wondering what's next. I don't need to see Mark Hamill ever again in Star Wars. And the reason I'm saying that is because I saw Star Wars in '77 and I saw him in '83. And yes, he was a part of the sequel trilogy, but part of the sequel trilogy's plan and thought, from a storytelling point of view, was to move forward and not to keep. What I'm saying is, and I'm not saying that in a negative way about Luke Skywalker. I've seen it done now. I saw it in 1983. I don't know. Can I see new, please? Next, it's a bit like if we go back to even talking about Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica, I do not need to see the same episode repeated every week. It's a bit boring for me. And
it's literally what I said.
And I think about that for the characters. And so The thing I'm really pleased about, and the thing that even interested me about the Acolyte was when it starts, you don't know who anybody is. And I think that it was really fascinating to watch how that kind of confused people, because that was what it was like for me in 1977, 78, when I was introduced to Mark Hamill and this guy called Luke Skywalker. Where's he going? I don't know. But now everybody has this reassuring cushion of Star Wars, if you weren't there in the 70s and 80s, that's almost like this history blanket that kind of goes, oh, yeah, but I can always return to the snuggle version of Star Wars because it happened. It unfolded for me in 1977, 78, and then 1980 and 1983. And so it's been fascinating to watch how people have received it week by week, because again, it does almost do the Flash Gordon thing. It has a cliffhanger at the end of each episode, if that makes sense. And then kind of, it's really weird. It's kind of like, to me, it's normal storytelling, but I've seen it throw people as if it's like something was deliberately wrong. It's like, no, have you watched Larry Buster Crabbe in Flash Gordon? At the end of the episode, he's there on the cliff edge going, I will stab you. And then magically in the next week, the cliff has just moved down a bit and there's a door and he's walked off. And that's how those old Flash Gordon shows worked. And so to me, I liked the fact that we tried everything new. And that's what's really interesting. You know, all the characters are new, the time period's new, the story's new. It's not trying to get the plans to the Death Star. It's doing its own thing. And so on that level, bring it on.
I literally said in the last episode, Kevin, and I'll say it again, I've just put a reel out there, is, you know, personally, I think Star Wars can be Star Wars and it will work without the Skywalker stuff. It can, and it will work.
It comes down to stories, and like, you know, look, some people love Andor, some people don't love Andor, some people like Rogue One, some people don't like Rogue One. You know, and I know now in a fight, look, here's the thing, you know, I love the original Star Wars because of sort of what it did for many reasons, but I now know there's a bunch of kids that, you know, it's been out so long. It's like an old Christmas movie from 1,000 years ago when Romans were around. Do you know what I mean? Is it doesn't mean much to them. It's editing is boring. It's slow. It's, you know, and then we go, even as a kid, you know, I saw The Empire Strikes Back, God knows how many times at the cinema, but I'm not, no offense. When Yoda was on, I just go to sleep. I thought it was dull as hell as a 10-year-old. I didn't give a stuff. It's, you can't like it all. You just have to kind of just let it be and
find a medium.
You know, and just
you know. It's like what we talked about off air a little bit. I see it too. People just don't. They won't. You and I, being a little bit older, we're used to, like, you know, 1 week you see part of the show, next week you see part of the show, and the story develops, and people were just like, no. I mean, like the helmet, the Cortosis helmet, people were losing their minds. I'm like, they're going to tell us, like, they're going, you know, they're going to tell us.
If people now, and then again, if you're a certain age, this is going to make other people going to go, what the hell is he talking about? If anyone was around for season 3 of Star Trek Next Gen in 1989, and you had to wait a year between Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2, then that's what you had to do. You had to wait a year, 1 year, before you knew if Picard was really the Borg or not. And so it's like, you know, people just had to wait 7 days, but it was kind of deliberate in the sense that it was literally setting up anticipation. The one thing I am very proud of that Acolyte did, for good or bad, or what was like, I've never seen so much conversation. And through all of the thing on the internet, regardless of that, all you can say is, well, they're talking about it.
Oh,
that's what we said too. People that were screaming about it were like, stop watching if you don't like it. Like,
but they didn't. And that's fine.
They kept watching. Yeah, I'm ecstatic.
And that means there was a reason to watch it. And I don't mean hate watch, because people each week were, whether you liked it or not, it had to unfold. It was built to unfold.
By it, weren't they?
And it was trying to do multiple things at the very same time. It was trying to unfold, and it was trying to show you completely new. And everyone as an audience was even trying to work out, well, which characters do I even like? Who am I supposed to like? And everyone's
Yeah.
said there's no mystery, but no one had worked out what the end was. Everyone will kind of go, "Yeah, I knew the end." It's like, no, you didn't. You didn't know all of the end. You couldn't work it all out.
All
You
my
didn't.
theories were out the window. I don't think I got a single prediction right.
Yeah,
But
and some of them were
all
kind
these,
of guessing and stabbing in the dark, but the whole complete picture was
yeah,
not guessed by
I loved
anybody.
it.
All right, well, it was a mystery then, wasn't it? Because you didn't get
Yeah,
it, or you can say,
yeah,
but I read many things across the internet, and people got close and worked out things, but all the intricacies of what was done and
oh yeah,
said,
yeah,
not one person. There's going to be 1,000 people now that mail in and go, "Oh, I was the person who got it all right." It's like, fine, whatever.
yeah.
But the general audience, it unwrapped. It
I
did its
loved
thing.
it. I loved it. And you've lined yourself up perfectly now for not a curveball, but more of a fastball. Okay, so I'm going to give you the big chair. What would you like to see, or what direction would you like to see Star Wars go in terms of a storyline now? Whether it's an Acolyte season 2, or if it's a further Star. What sort of direction would you personally like?
I'd like to see them do two things. One of them is because it is so broad now. I think
Yeah,
there has to be a combination of partly giving people what they're comfortable with,
yeah,
and partly giving people new. That's probably
yeah,
the lightest version I can think of what it is. Is like, I just think
yeah,
that some people never want to move on, and that's fine. So there's bits of
yeah,
Star Wars for them, but I'm one of the people that would like to see new. But I don't know
yeah.
that's dependent on a lot of
Perfect.
things. Because
Yeah,
yeah, that's the easiest way to say it.
yeah. Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
I don't even know what that means because I don't know what new is. Because in a funny way, what I mean is like, I just don't need to keep repeating the same. For me, I don't need to keep
Yeah,
repeating the same paths.
I get it. You've already said it numerous times as well, Kev. Exact same as me. Move on from the Skywalker stuff now. Let's get a new storyline out there or a new direction. It's not always about Jedi versus Sith. There's
Well, it
other
just
things
makes
out there. I want to see.
what's really interesting to me is like, when I was a kid, and again, those of a certain generation will look at it this way. When I
Yeah,
first saw Star Wars and Alex Guinness said, and I was once a Jedi Knight like your father, and there was
yeah,
the Clone Wars, and you go, I wonder what the Clone Wars are. I've seen them now. It's like, oh, that's not what I thought. And so, what I mean is, the more that is explained,
yeah,
some people love that explanation, but other people think it makes the galaxy smaller. And so it was quite interesting
yeah,
how in those original films, all these throwaway comments have almost become these massive talking points. Like, what's a boat
yeah,
spider on
yeah,
a Thursday night? It's like, really? It was just a
yeah.
line in the film, which, yeah, and it's kind of, and it's, I don't know, it's quite interesting. And even the fandom, I've posted a couple of things on Instagram, which is I've got all the original Marvel Star Wars comics I bought back in
Oh
the
wow.
70s and 80s, and in some of the letters pages, there's people going, I don't understand The Empire Strikes Back. I can't believe that Luke Skywalker did that. I hate this show and all this kind of stuff. And it hasn't changed through the years. It's like everybody kind of, everybody. The thing I've noticed about Star Wars is, and even I went through this as a fan, is that everybody really struggles with adjustment. Not many people are
Yeah,
open-minded.
change.
I wonder what's around
Yeah.
the corner.
That's
So
amazing that you've said that as well. I'd love to see some of those pages and that comes out. I'm going to finish up soon now, or I'm going to finish now, Kev, because obviously we're nearly
sure.
an hour into it. I know you're extremely busy guy. I've got one last question. I sort of alluded to it earlier. So, would you and are you going to release a concept art book? And if so, can I get a signed copy?
Well, you can get the Art of Star Wars books. I mean, a lot of those. You have to remember that I don't own any of the artwork. So
Okay.
everything I do as an artist
Yeah.
is owned by Warner Brothers, Lucasfilm, Disney, Paramount. And so even though those works are in various books, I don't know if I'd
Probably
ever
got
get.
a lot of them.
I don't know if I'd ever get the bloody permission because it would just be it would be painful. And in fairness, like I don't do half as much concept art as I used to and stuff like that. I do like to keep my hand in and do the odd piece. There's a whole bunch of stuff I did for the Acolyte. It's like I've got all the paintings of exactly what the versions of the fly through the rings were, which was before the ships kind of tumble and land on Bread Dock and stuff like that. And I do like doing it, but it's like I just use it. I know it sounds very strange. I've done so much. It's like, does that get me the answer? It's not like, oh my God, I've done a painting, hang it on the wall. Concept art literally is like, so you do want it red. Right, good, I'll make that, I'll build it. It's to get answers. It's a process. And the other thing that people need to understand about concept art is what you see in the books is not necessarily the design of the film. You're seeing... I like to describe actually what you see in a lot of art of books. If it's not in the film, I call it the art of what we didn't make because it's wrong. And so the other way to think about it is you're trying to move on a process as a concept artist or a designer to get to where you need to be. And though I see a lot of people go, oh, that'd be really cool, that should have been the thing. It's like, no, it's wrong because we didn't use it. It wasn't needed. It was overwrought. It was too complicated. It was the wrong color. And so concept art now is very different to what it was even 10 or 15 years ago, where it was a bit more contained and precise. So these days it can be a little bit misleading as to what it really is for and how it really works, because we didn't have that many concept artists on the Acolyte, because a lot of it can be either done with other ways depending on the speed you need to work at. And and if you look at the art of the original Star Wars films, there's a lot, but there's not that much compared to what we do now. And also what people don't realize is that sometimes concept artists do what the hell they want and not the director or the designer. And you kind of go, it's a great painting, you're awesome. What the hell is this? I'm not using it. And so I'm not going to, but I can go through a million art books and go, yeah, I remember when the director said, what is that in front of me? Some of those pictures that are in the books were literally in front of us for me. No, wrong, next one. Oh, that's interesting. And I'll get rid of that. And people kind of go, oh, they must have thought and planned. It's like the guy literally was going on holiday for the weekend. He threw out a painting and it wasn't what we asked for and we couldn't change it. And so, but sometimes they also develop some of the very correct things that make you go, oh, wow, thank you. That's really helpful. But it is a part of a process in conjunction with obviously the production designer and the art directors, and a lot of people go to making things. So when you see a piece of concept art, that's never really the whole, or even sometimes any of the story. Sometimes I've even done concept art after the event to fill a gap. So it's an interesting, helpful, but sometimes misleading process.
Awesome. Well, Kev, we've kept you more than long enough. Again, super appreciate your time. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege to get to meet you and talk to you. No
worries. Thank you very much
for your work. Thank you for everything you've done too, man. It's one of my favorite things. Like I ran into Doug Chang before and stuff like that. Just I want to say thank you for what you do for us as fans. I mean, I know that the world is crazy right now, but you've got two guys right here that absolutely adored everything you've been part of.
In a funny way, one way to finish the whole conversation is that people, should we say, can either be very responsive in a positive or negative way, if I had to put it politely, to what we do. But just know that I was so much of a Star Wars fan, I ended up basically doing it as a career and working on it. I'm not saying my life revolves around it. I love to design many things. I just happen to be a kid that saw it and I design on it. So people can't tell me that I'm not as much as a fan of they are and they're better than me because they read more books. It doesn't work that way. I say to them, if you want to do that, then fine, and get a job and go and change it. Because I, in a funny way, got a job and I'm able to change Star Wars to my version of what I love. And other people, if they want to, it's like, if you don't like it, then write a book or write a screenplay and make your own version. That's just the way it is. That's what I did. I'll be honest with you, I had no plan, intention, or thought ever that I'd ever work on a Star Wars project. It just turned out that way.
I'm glad it did.
Well, I'm the same, so hopefully it happens to me one day.
You never know. You never know.
You never know. Again, thank you so much, Kev. Super appreciate you. I'll go with this for both of us then, Kev. So let the past die. Kill it if you have to. It's the only way you become who you were meant to be.
That's one way of looking at it.
There you go. Again, Kev, thank you again so much. And for all of us we have spoken. See you guys next week.
All the best.